I'm Vivian Aronowitz, Kaiser dietitian on the Big Island, and I'm joined by Kimberly Oshita, my fellow dietitian on Oahu. Hi, Kim.
Hi, everyone. Glad you can make it today.
Okay, so this is PowerPoint is copyrighted by Kaiser. Feel free to take notes or picture of 1 or 2 slides, but this is a Kaiser presentation. So we have several people on our team. Some of them you may have worked with already, including coaches, MDs, health educators, and our dietitians. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? Why Plant Strong, what Plant Strong is, sample meals, and how to transition, resources and recipes to help you on your journey. So Plant Strong eating may be for you if you want to lose weight, you want to feel better. Do you want to improve, stabilize, or even reverse a chronic condition such as heart disease, high cholesterol, diabetes, or high blood pressure? Would you like to take fewer medications? Are you open to changing your diet if it could really improve your health? Hopefully you answered yes to any of these questions, and you'll be learning a lot as we go through this PowerPoint today. The booklet that you may have received will give you information about a low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet, and will include a lot of the information we go through in this PowerPoint.
So, Viv, what are some of the benefits of a plant-based diet?
Oh, thanks for asking, Kim. There are many, many benefits. You can see on the slide here, lowering cholesterol, blood pressure and blood sugar, reversal or prevention of heart disease, longer and healthier life, lower risk of cancer and diabetes, may even slow the progression of certain types of cancer, reduced inflammation, including rheumatoid arthritis, fewer medications, lower food costs, good for the environment, and good for your immune function. So what is included in this way of eating is plants in their whole unprocessed form, such as vegetables, fruits, beans, lentils, nuts, seed, whole grains, and small amount of healthy fats, hopefully included in the food as opposed to separated out. It does not include animal products such as meat, poultry, fish, dairy, and eggs, or processed foods. So let's take a look at some studies showing the benefit of plant-based eating. This is a review of 14 randomized trials for diabetes published in the Journal of Endocrine Practice. The greatest improvement in blood lipids, body weight, and hemoglobin A1C occurred in the participants following the low-fat plant-based diets. And as we go through this PowerPoint, I'd like you to look at some of the beautiful pictures that we have, the photos of some wonderful dishes to give you ideas of things that you can make, like this white bean minestrone on the left and a Buddha bowl on the right, which includes some quinoa, garbanzos, and different vegetables with a little topping of guacamole. The Cancer Society, both the World Cancer Research Fund, the American Institute for Cancer Research, as well as the American Cancer Society, are all recommending eating a whole food plant-based diet. You can see by the circle in green on the left side there. Also, limiting or avoiding would, of course, be better. Any kind of fast food, highly processed foods, high in fat, refined starches and sugars. So that's the starches without the fiber in. Limiting red meat and processed meats, as well as sugary drinks. And while you are in the treatment mode for cancer, you do not want to have the supplements for sure. Okay. So let's take a look at the risk for diabetes and heart disease. The lowest risk would be those following the totally plant-based diet. If you add egg whites, you increase your risk a little, as well as fish, and then on with poultry, whole eggs, red meat, and processed meats, giving you the highest risk.
So Viv, does this mean that you can eat fish on a plant-based diet?
Well, technically, a plant-based diet, if it's 100% plant-based, would not include fish. It would only include plants. But if you did want to have some animal food, eating egg whites or fish would be a lower risk, as you can see on the continuum over here. All right, so let's take a look at what the problems are with high animal protein intake. You can have weight gain coming from the saturated fat, total fat, and cholesterol, as well as the growth factor hormones, nitrates, chemical contaminants, endotoxin, excess bile acids, and bad breath. Those are some of the disease-causing factors causing the weight gain, as well as cancer. Certainly the hormones in the foods causing inflammation, causing atherosclerosis, and high blood sugar. And these are some of the results of a high animal food diet.
So what are growth factor hormones and how exactly do they affect us?
Well, growth factor hormones are substances naturally occurring in animals. We have our own growth factor hormones, and that helps not only when we're growing as a child, but as we need repair on a constant basis in our body at nighttime. We have an increase in that growth factor hormone. In other animals, of course, they would have the same. But when we eat these animals, we are getting an influx of these growth hormones, which are not beneficial for us. They're beneficial for their own species. And a lot of animal agriculture includes injecting those animals with growth factor hormones so they will grow more quickly. So not only do you get the dose of naturally occurring growth factor hormones, but also the ones that are added. I'd like to say a little more about blood sugar because that affects so many people, and people don't think of animal foods as affecting blood sugar. They usually think only of carbohydrates. But what happens is the fats that come from those animal products have the greatest effect on blocking your insulin receptors. So when your sugar is high and insulin is secreted from the pancreas, and that insulin is like a key to allow the sugar to move across from your bloodstream into your cells, those fats actually block the receptors. They're like blocking that keyhole so that insulin key cannot fit in. And then you end up with the high sugars. All right, let's take a look at all the benefits that you get from that wonderful, colorful array of fruits and vegetables on the top left of the screen versus that big piece of meat and fat. So in the plant foods, you've got tons of fiber. You have vitamins. You have antioxidants and phytonutrients, which are substances that are not vitamins or minerals, but are very important in helping us to prevent cancer, anti-aging, and are extremely important for health. Growth factor hormone that we just discussed is very low in the plants. Cholesterol and saturated fat are low. Actually, cholesterol is 0 in animal foods, only found in animal foods. There are some plant foods with saturated fat. That would be coconut and palm kernel oil primarily. There's other substances like the PAHs, AGEs, advanced glycation end products, HCAs, and new 5-GCs that are detrimental, and they're very low in the plants but high in the animal products. And then TMAO, trimethylamine oxidase, which is implicated in cardiovascular disease, is very low in plant foods and high in the animal foods actually produced by the bacteria coming from eating the high animal foods.
I hear a lot of talk about fiber these days, Viv. What are some of the things that fiber does for us?
What a great question, Kim. Fiber is really the foundation for health. So many people are obsessed with protein, but they really should be obsessed with fiber, because fiber is feeding our good bacteria. What we call prebiotics come from fibers, feeding that whole array of probiotics that we want to have in our body that are helpful for our health. So on the bottom you see a picture of our microbiome. When you eat a lot of fiber, you are going to have the most beneficial microbiome, and that's how we maintain that with eating a high fiber diet. Of course, fiber is helpful in just regular gut health. Most of us think of fiber related to regular bowel movements, and fiber is helpful to make us feel full more easily, so we end up eating less food. It stretches those receptors in our gut, and so we feel full and do not eat as many calories. Okay, so now that we've discussed a little bit about diabetes, maybe you'll be able to get an idea of which of the following leads to greater diabetes risk: the Lilikoi passion or the slice of Spam. So guess what? That serving of Lilikoi passion fruit can, if you have that daily, can increase your risk of diabetes by 25%, because it is coming into your body like a tsunami and is requiring more insulin to be produced. However, as we discussed a few minutes ago, that slab of Spam has a higher risk for diabetes because of the fat and the fact that it's a processed meat. So that fat is jamming up those keyholes where the insulin is trying to fit, and therefore the sugar cannot move across from the bloodstream into the cells.
That's interesting, because I just want to say a lot of people will say that they think it's the juice or soda that affects their blood sugars more. But again, what you said, it's interesting that it's actually the fat or the fatty kinds of animal products that can affect the blood sugars even more than the juice or soda.
Yes, really important to understand, because a lot of people think if they just eat vegetables and animal foods, they're doing well, and they might have some short-term gain, but it's not going to keep them healthier in the long run, because they're going to become less insulin sensitive. Okay, so let's move on to some other diseases related to animal protein. So some studies found that men who have prostate cancer will have a greater risk with intake of eggs because of the choline in the eggs. In fact, a 70% higher risk of lethal prostate cancer. And that choline, as you can see here, is found in eggs, milk, fish, red meat. It would be the egg yolk. And those with cancer and high egg intake advanced twice as fast. So every time we eat some animal food, there is going to be some effect. Now, recently, the National Kidney Foundation had put this up on their website, which is very exciting, because there is more and more evidence coming out that eating a plant-based diet is really beneficial for kidney health. and that the proteins and other nutrients coming from plants are much more gentle on the kidney than animal foods. So if you have kidney disease, beginning stages, even advanced, eating a plant-based diet can be beneficial. Now, what about fish? That is the question that comes up so often. Somehow people think fish is in a different category because fish has been promoted as better for the heart. Now, if you have gout, you really do want to avoid fish because those purines in the fish are going to raise your uric acid level. And we know today our oceans are very contaminated, so when you eat fish, you are eating whatever that fish has eaten or that seafood that animal has eaten. And a lot of us think, well, what about the omega-3s? But we don't need fish to get them. Let's think about where do the fish or even those land animals that are touted as higher in omega-3 get their omega-3s from? Well, guess what? They get it from plants. They get it from the algae, the seaweed, or on land from the grass. But you can also get them from walnuts, pumpkin seeds, and flax and chia and hemp are all really good sources. All right, so let's come back to the fiber because as you remember, I said how important fiber is. Higher fiber intake is better health. 97% of Americans are fiber deficient. The average American only gets 50% of fiber needed. And as I mentioned earlier, fiber contains prebiotics, which are the foods that feed those probiotics, those good bacteria. And when the bacteria digest the fibers, they produce these substances grouped as postbiotics, which are so important for our health, including our immune function, our mental well-being because of the hormones like serotonin and dopamine to a large extent are produced by those bacteria and their end products. They help us extract more nutrition from our food. They help regulate our metabolic rate, which is so important, especially for those who are trying to lose weight. So let's look at a summary of what we've discussed so far. Weight loss without portion control, because you remember, those foods are super high in fiber and they're stretching the stomach and helping us to feel full sooner. Powerful disease reversal. Across the board benefits, heals the whole body. Improved immune function. Side effects are usually good ones. Often pleasant and incredible surprises. And the benefits can be contagious. Those around you will see how much better you feel, how much less pain you have, how much more energy you feel, how better your mood is, and they're going to want to know what you've been doing. So what is the most surprising fact you have learned today so far? Weight loss without portion control, disease reversal, the role of fiber in improving health, that fat has a greater impact on diabetes, or all of the above. Hopefully, you could check off some of those boxes. So let's look at a case study here. We have a 38-year-old whose weight was pretty high. He was in the obese category, and his weight kept going up and down with diets, trying all different things. He had prediabetes, fatty liver, and GERD, acid reflux. He had some sleep apnea, and his genetics were not that great because his father had a heart attack at 45 and grandfather at 38. He felt like a failure at portion control and exercise which is what is mostly touted for weight loss. And he thought, there's nothing he can do about it. Well, guess what? He went on a whole food, low-fat, plant-based diet and lost 75 pounds in 8 months. He's maintained that weight loss for 8 years and more. His BMI, body mass index, is now normal. His pre-diabetes resolved, fatty liver, GERD resolved, blood pressure dropped 20 points, and his sleep apnea symptoms resolved. He is so excited about his health and the food that he's eating that he has shared this with his patients. Yes, he is a doctor in Kaiser in Southern California. This is Dr. Luenda. And he continues to maintain this lifestyle himself, as well as help so many other people in his program called Lifestyle 180. So what foods are included in a whole food plant-based diet? Well, there are foods derived from plants, but unfortunately many that have other things added or subtracted that makes them not very healthy. So those veggie straws are made from some potato powder, salt, and fat, and a little vegetable coloring. The cereal, which is really more like candy, says berries, but probably has a drop of berry juice. And the candy that says acai and blueberry and pomegranate says flavors, but one gets attracted by the idea of pomegranate, blueberries, and acai, but of course there's not too much of those in there and lots of added sugar. So the foods that you want to focus on are those that are processed as little as possible, free of additives, free from artificial matters. So straight picked from the field, washed well, slightly processed. The less processed Quaker oats or oats would be oat groats, steel cut oats, or at least the regular cooking oats versus the more instant versions. And of course your veggies. Some other foods that would be included would be your greens, whether you're going to eat them cooked or raw. If raw, please wash well. Your nuts and seeds, like we've got sunflower seeds up there and almonds on the bottom. White beans. There are so many different beans out there. White beans are very versatile. They're small for people that don't like the beanie texture. They can be pureed and made into sauces. Really delicious. Mangoes, of course, we love those in Hawaii. And down on the bottom middle is the steel cut oats. Okay, so let's think about these definitions a little bit. Many of us have heard of vegan diets, and those would be excluding all animal products, but may include some processed and refined foods. In fact, there's been an explosion of more vegan meat alternatives that have been hitting the markets and available in many food outlets. Vegetarians may include dairy and eggs, and pescatarian may include dairy, eggs, fish, or seafood. But do we have to go 100% plant-based? Well, you can see from this Adventist health study, where there were over 60,000 participants, that those that were eating the vegan, and they may have included some processed food, we're not sure, but those that excluded all animal products had the lowest body weight and the lowest rate of diabetes. Those that included some milk and eggs, the lacto-ovo vegetarians, weighed a little more and had a little more risk in terms of diabetes, and so on up until the non-vegetarian have the highest rates. So whatever you're able to do is going to be beneficial. As you can see, you can reduce your risk of obesity and diabetes by making changes. Whatever you can do, the more the better. It's dose related. So let's look at this continuum again. The lowest risk for diabetes, heart disease, and many other conditions is 100% plant-based, but as you add in the egg whites, fish, poultry, whole eggs, red meat, and processed meats, you will increase your risk. But if you're able to make some changes away from the standard American diet, which we call SAD, whatever you can do, you will gain some benefit. So let's understand why a plant-based diet is lower in calories. Here we compare what is in 100 calories. 14 cups of spinach. Well, I know that sounds like a lot, but when you cook that down, depending on how long you cook it for, it's 2 to 3 cups of spinach, which wouldn't really be that hard to eat. And you're getting so much nutrition for that 100 calories. 4 cups of cherry tomatoes. How about snacking on those instead of some other things? And you'd be getting a lot of nutrition. 2 cups of strawberries. Those would not be a hardship to eat at all, but you'd be getting a lot of nutrition in there. The 2/3 of a cup of cooked oatmeal or half a cup of canned beans or the medium banana, all are 100 calories, giving you a lot of nutrition and some sense of satiety as you eat those foods. Now, on the other hand, the processed foods like 9 potato chips or 1 peanut butter cup, 1 fig cookie, 1/3 of a bagel or 2 chicken nuggets or 1/3 of a hot dog are probably not going to leave you much satisfied, and invariably you'll be wanting to eat more of those, and then the calories start adding up. Now, what about protein? Most people have that worry. Will I get enough protein? Because we have such a strong ethos in this country and in the Western world that we need more protein. But actually, as we found earlier, animals get their protein and other nutrients from plants. That's where they get them. So that 2 to 3 cups of cooked spinach is actually giving you 12.5 grams of protein. The tomatoes, 5 grams, oatmeal 4, and beans 8. Beans are a great thing to use instead of meats in a plant-based diet. Whereas the chicken nuggets and the 1/3 of a hot dog is not giving you very much, and those are the animal foods. All right, so protein is important because it's in every cell of our body. It's used to build and repair muscles, bone, skin, and the immune function. We also need it for hormones and enzymes. But it's easy to get those from plant foods, such as your beans, peas, nuts, seeds, soy, whole grains, and vegetables. And we only need about 0.36 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So for most people, about 50 plus or minus is going to be good.
And Viv, what about in pregnancy? How much protein might somebody need?
So in pregnancy, you will need a bit more because you are supplying protein to that growing baby. And so more like 71 grams would be optimal for a day.
And then are there concerns about soy or soy products?
Actually, great question, Kim. We do not need to worry about soy in its more natural form, meaning soy milk, edamame, soybeans, tempeh, or tofu, because those have been used for centuries by people in Asia as their primary source of protein, and they actually have had much better health stats than the Western world in terms of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, many types of cancers, than we have in the Western world. But it is recommended that you use organic, non-GMO soy because we don't have a lot of evidence to the health status of the benefits of non-organic soy. And by the way, most animals are fed soy, so people eating an animal full diet are getting a lot of soy anyway, but they focus on soy as, potential problem. We don't recommend a lot of processed soy foods because we don't really know about that. It's a fairly more recent addition to the diet. Now, B12 is something that we do need to supplement if we're 100% plant-based. We used to get it from the soil, but now if you don't eat animal products, you do need to take a supplement. And most people over 50 anyway should be taking a B12 supplement because it is harder to absorb from the body. And so you may want to discuss that with your physician. A lot of foods are getting fortified with B12, but it's very easy to take as a chewable, sublingual, and you can take that once a week or on a daily basis. Okay, so let's look at the protein needs here. If you are on the lighter side, around 30 to 40 grams per day is fine, and then moves up as you get larger. But these numbers are also for what would be a desirable weight for you. So if you're very overweight, but that's not where your normal body weight or your more ideal body weight would be, then you don't need as much as someone who, maybe is a taller and larger person. So really, it's not that hard to get your protein, as you can see here. If you have some oatmeal, soy milk, and almonds for breakfast, and some beans and rice and salad for lunch, and some whole wheat pasta with veggies and sunflower seeds, you'll be getting over 50 grams in a day. Plus, you're likely eating some snacks as well, which would add to that amount, hopefully nutritious snacks. So the experts are pretty consistent in saying that if you get a varied diet, including the foods that we're discussing, there is no need to worry about protein. All right, so we want to make sure that everybody gets up and stretches regularly during the day, not sitting too long, so you might want to do that before we go into the next segment, which Kim will be leading us on.
Awesome, thanks, Viv.
Okay, so let's go ahead and just do a quick stretch since we've been sitting for a while, if you haven't already gotten one in. So maybe take a minute, stretch your arms overhead, lean from left to right. You can lower your arms and do some hip circles in one direction, and then reverse it to the other direction. You can maybe take a minute to lean forward, hold on to your table or your knees or your shins to get a stretch for your back. And then also do a couple stretches for your neck. So put your right ear to your right shoulder and stretch the left side of your neck. And then put your left ear to your left shoulder, stretch the right side of your neck, and feel free to continue as I'm presenting. We do encourage people to stand up, get in a little bit of a stretch or a little bit of activity just so that they're not sitting for too long. So I'm going to go over what a whole food plant-based diet includes, as well as some practical applications for meal ideas and snacks, as well as showing some pictures and going over some of the resources in the packet that you might have on you. So on page 3 of the plant-based diet booklet, it goes over the different food groups. It goes over what's included in the food groups, what the serving sizes are, and how many servings are recommended per day. So for example, the non-starchy vegetables, things like the greens, cauliflower, carrots, mushrooms, peppers, tomatoes, the greens including things like chard, kale, bok choy, all of that. Serving size is 1 cup raw or half a cup cooked. We want to aim for at the very least 6 servings a day, if not more. And this might look like getting in about half a plate of non-starchy vegetables for each meal, if you're imagining a regular size 8 to 9 inch plate. The next group is the starchy vegetables. So these are things like potatoes, corn, peas, taro, poi, ulu, or breadfruit. Serving size is half a cup, and you want to aim for 2 to 4 servings per day. A lot of people I talk to who have, pre-diabetes or diabetes, they'll ask me, but doesn't it affect my blood sugar? But again, eating a less processed diet, eating mostly plant foods, these things will have a lot of fiber, and so you may find that these starchy vegetables, they don't spike the blood sugar up as much as some of the more processed foods, things like, the white soft noodles or the bread. So the starchy vegetables can be a good option. And same thing with the fruits. So the fruits can be a good option for dessert. We recommend aiming for 2 to 4 servings per day. Things like berries or melons, they're a little bit lower in sugar, meaning you can eat a little bit more of them if you have diabetes or prediabetes without it affecting your blood sugar as much. And also I want to add, for people who are following a plant-based diet, they may find that the longer they stick with it and really emphasize eating the unprocessed foods, they find that their blood sugar tends to improve, and so they're able to eat the fruit or they're able to eat the potato without having it raise the blood sugar as much as it did before. So their sensitivity, their insulin sensitivity improves. The next group are the beans, peas, and lentils. The serving size is a half cup cooked, aiming for at least 2 to 5 servings per day, because this is a great source of your fiber. This can also be a good source of protein for those on a fully whole food plant-based diet. A little bit more processed are the things like the burgers, the patties, but things like tofu, tempeh, those will be fine. And like Viv mentioned, the soy, there's no evidence saying that it's bad for you. In a lot of cases, it's been shown to be very beneficial. On the next page, it goes over the whole grains, so things like rice, quinoa, farro, oats. Try to choose a less processed version. So for example, the oats, the oat groats or the steel cut oats would be the least processed. Then the rolled oats, then the packet oats, they kind of look like flour, so they're a lot more processed. So try to choose the least processed ones most often. Things like the breads, the noodles or tortillas, those are a little more processed. So those are more things you may want to limit. Nuts and seeds are the next group. So these include things like almonds, flax seeds, walnuts, like Viv mentioned, walnuts, flax seeds, chia, hemp. They can be good sources of omega-3s. If you're looking to reverse heart disease, you may want to avoid the nuts and seeds, just because the diet that's been shown to reverse heart disease is a very low-fat diet. So even the whole food plants, to reverse heart disease, we do recommend avoiding those. Fats and oils, so these are things like the vegetable oils, avocados, olives. Same thing with these. You want to choose the less processed version, because thinking about the difference between the avocado and the avocado oil, if you ate the avocado oil, you're mostly just getting the fat. Whereas if you ate the avocado, you're getting some fiber, you're getting some vitamin E, you're getting a lot more nutrients. And again, if your goal is to lose weight, you may want to limit the fats, even though they're whole food, just because they can be a little bit more calorie dense. There are dairy alternatives, things like soy, almond, hemp milk. We recommend avoiding rice milk because it can be high in arsenic. As far as the other plant milks, when people are asking me about calcium, I say look at the label, because certain plant milks will be higher in calcium than others, so you just want to compare the different brands. Herbs and spices are also great plant foods to include. So these are things like cinnamon, ginger, garlic, green onions. They have lots of great properties. So in the past, all these herbs and spices, they were used to improve health or to prevent problems. So for example, raw garlic has antibacterial properties. Things like ginger and turmeric have anti-inflammatory properties. Rosemary can help to neutralize carcinogens created when people grill things and it becomes blackened. And so including lots of herbs and spices, it's also a great way to add flavor without adding so much salt. So for people who are having salty sauces, I tell them to cut the sauce in half. Instead, add lemon juice to give it some flavor and some zing without adding all the sodium. And here, just showing you some examples for the plate method in your plant-based diet booklet. This is on page 8 and 9, along with the sample meal plan. So basically, a quarter of your plate will be some sort of plant-based protein. It could be tofu, it could be beans or lentils. The other quarter would be a starch, so some sort of whole grain or starchy vegetable like a potato, brown rice, quinoa. At least half the plate would be the non-starchy vegetables like the bok choy we have up here. You can also add a salad. You can add a handful of nuts, a piece of fruit. And so hopefully to a lot of you, this looks like a decent amount of food. I think the common misconception about people who are plant-based or vegan is that we just eat salads all day. But actually there's a whole abundance of foods. There's so much food and you can feel really full on it, especially if you're including the things like beans and lentils. This is another example of something I got. So that had sauteed beans, stir-fried veggies with walnuts, avocado on top, and a scoop of brown rice. And so now I'm just going to be showing you some of the ideas we have for meals. If you turn to the plant-based packet on pages 8 and 9, we have sample meal ideas for meals and snacks. So breakfast, it could be things like oatmeal. Again, steel cut or oat groats would be the best. We also have here tofu scramble. So instead of egg, you can use tofu. You can use turmeric to color it yellow. There's an Indian spice called black salt or kala namak, which has a sulfury-like taste to give it kind of the egg-like taste for people who like that. We also have avocado toast. We have a green smoothie. For people with prediabetes or diabetes, I do recommend watching the carbs if they're making smoothies, meaning the liquid should be a non-carb source. And then maybe limit the fruit to the size of the fist or less, depending on blood sugars. Add in plenty of non-starchy vegetables like kale or spinach. Snack ideas, things like soybeans. Popcorn can also be another high fiber snack we don't have up here. We have a Mexican pizza in the upper right with mashed beans, jalapenos, tomatoes. You can also use some salsa. We also have nuts, nori. Lunch ideas. So bean burgers are really good. They're really easy to make on your own. I'll talk about using something called the flax egg. So we have in the upper left lentil burger with hummus and veggies. The bottom left is a cauliflower jackfruit taco. So jackfruit can be a good substitute for pork. Another good substitute for pork can be oyster mushrooms if you grate it with a fork. So that would be like the hamakua mushrooms here. Lentil soup is a good one. So soup, stews, those are good ways to include beans. We also have a really simple lunch with some tofu, bok choy, a scoop of rice. And then the upper right is a salad with avocado, kale, cucumber, soybeans, and a tahini dressing. There's also room for sweets, but making them, try to make them as minimally processed as possible, trying to include as much plant foods as possible. So fruit can make a good sweet snack, and it's simple. The upper right, we have our sweet potato or yam brownies. So this recipe is on our KP Hawaii Facebook page. If you go there, click on photos, click on healthy grinds. We have the recipes with the pictures. So instead of using flour, basically you're using cooked sweet potato or yams, or you can even use black beans. There's a lot of recipes for black bean brownies. We have a poi parfait in the middle with some fruit, poi. The bottom left is a chia seed pudding. So chia seeds, you can soak them in some sort of plant milk, let it sit for a few hours or overnight, and it'll expand and form a tapioca pudding-like consistency. And this recipe is also on our KP Hawaii Facebook page. For dinner, we have mushroom shiso gyoza. So like I mentioned, mushrooms, they can be a good substitute for pork, but also meat in general because they have a good hearty texture. Portobello mushroom burgers are good. The bottom left, we have a tempeh stir fry. So for those of you who haven't tried tempeh, it's similar to tofu. It's made out of soybeans. It's a little less processed and it comes in a block and you can see all the beans stuck together. It's a little bit heartier and dense in texture, so this can be good to use in things like soups or stews, or you can crumble it and make taco filling. Same thing with lentils. Lentils can make really good taco filling instead of meat. Or for people who are looking to transition, you can take out half the meat and add in some lentils or add in some tempeh. The bottom right is a mung bean tofu papaya soup. So in your plant-based packet, we do have this recipe in there. And then the top right is a pumpkin arugula pizza. And so again, these ideas, they're on page 8 and 9 of the plant-based diet book packet. So we have breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack ideas, page 9. It's like more local ideas for Hawaii. So you may see things you already eat, things like miso soup, nishime, vegetarian lau. And then I do encourage people to just make substitutes as well. If you have a favorite recipe or something you really like and you're looking to make it whole food plant-based, you can make a lot of substitutes to a regular type of recipe. So instead of using oil, you can use silken tofu, you can use nut butters, you can use pureed fruit like applesauce or banana, you can use avocado. Kind of depends on the recipe. So I know there's a recipe on lighter.world for pesto that's oil-free. So instead of using the oil, you can use silken tofu and then you add in basil, garlic, lemon juice, nutritional yeast. For baking, things like pureed fruit might work well. You could also use nut butter instead of the oil.
So Kim, what have you made recently where you made substitutions like this?
So recently, I actually don't substitute regular recipes just because I don't eat a lot of things that are non-whole food plant-based, but recently I did make a bean burger using a flax egg, which is what I'm just about to talk about. So I just had a couple cans of beans, I added spices, I added, what did I add? Smoked chipotle, cilantro, garlic, a little bit of onion powder, I think, and cumin. I made a flax egg, so the equivalent of 1 egg, if you're substituting recipes, you can use 1 tablespoon of ground flax with 3 tablespoons of water and let it soak. I did want it to be a little bit more sticky, so for my recipe, I actually did 2 tablespoons of ground flax and with 3 tablespoons of water to give it kind of a thicker, more binding type of consistency. So yeah, the flax egg can be really useful. You can also use it in baking. Nutritional yeast, that's an ingredient that's found in a lot of non-dairy cheeses. So it's a little bit umami taste. I wouldn't say it tastes exactly like cheese, but it does have kind of a tangy taste that people will put. You can also sprinkle a little bit of it in sauces to make it a little bit creamy. In that sweet potato brownie recipe that Viv made, instead of using white flour, she used sweet potato. You can also use beans, yams. So depending on what the recipe is, you can also use a whole grain flour instead of the white flour. You can make your own oat flour. So by processing rolled oats, you can process that until it becomes a flour-like texture. You can even make your own quinoa flour. If you have a good coffee grinder, you can grind up the quinoa seeds. And then instead of using sugar, you can make fruit puree and dates. And what about you, Viv? What things have you done recently as far as substitutions or just using some of these whole food plant-based ingredients and recipes?
Well, I use bananas and dried fruit if I'm making muffins, and instead of using any oil or sugars, and that works out really well. I also grind up oats and use that instead of flour. So really maximizing all the foods that have fiber in them, and then the natural sweetness versus ones that have been extracted.
Mm-hmm. And that also reminds me too, because we do get a lot of questions about people asking, what do I use instead of oil if I'm cooking something? So you can use vegetable broth, you can use water, steaming things. It's not that hard to cook without oil. You can just substitute with some other sort of liquid. Usually water is what I'll use. Vegetable broth, I don't use that so much. Water is always available, so it's an easy thing to sub out. For those people who don't like to cook, there's a lot of options for quote-unquote fast food that's actually faster and healthier than sitting in line in the fast food line and ordering something. So we have these, Dr. McDougall's has his soups where it comes in this little container and you just add water. So the ones that are bean-based, like the minestrone, the split pea, the black bean soup, those are also really high in fiber as well. And you just add hot water to that. You may want to keep some things on hand. So there's those little packets of Indian spiced vegetables and beans, that Tasty Bite brand, but I also recently have seen more and more brands coming out with similar items where it's beans with some sort of spice in it and you can just heat it up. For the Tasty Bite ones, and even for the other brands, you do want to double check the ingredients label to make sure it doesn't contain any dairy, because sometimes they will. So just make sure there's no cream or cheese or milk or anything like that. But it's good to use. I use it kind of more as a sauce, putting it over extra beans or lentils and some more veggies I'll add, and then eating it with quinoa or brown rice. Also having some of those soups on hand can be good if you're looking to thin out the sodium. Again, you can add more beans, you can add more vegetables, fresh or frozen is fine. Oatmeal is really good, so I usually use the instant steel cut oats because they cook a little bit faster. Oops. And then also salsa can be a good condiment to have on hand. We have poi up here, which can be a good quick food as well. So poi is considered a healthy food, which is good news. Loma Linda also came out with some of these more ready-to-make meals. They had a chipotle bowl there. And then we have Ezekiel bread. So as far as the breads go, if people are eating bread, I do recommend usually the Ezekiel ones because they tend to be higher in fiber. And the plain ones don't have any added sugar. One word of caution, so for people who are on blood pressure or blood sugar medications, if you switch to a whole food plant-based diet, or even if you make a transition, it's possible that your levels can drop quickly, which can be dangerous. So if you're on medication for blood pressure or blood sugar, we ask you to monitor it closely and stay in contact with your provider, who can adjust the medications if needed. So this is good news, being able to safely reduce medications, but emphasis on being safe. We do want you to be really safe about it by monitoring and staying in contact with your doctor so that they can help you do it. For people who don't want to lose weight, same thing, we recommend monitoring your weight, and you may really need to focus on eating more often, making sure you include and plan snacks between meals, and then maybe even emphasizing the more calorie-dense plant foods such as the nuts, seeds, starchy vegetables, or whole grains. Special nutrients to consider. So on the plant-based packet, this is on page 3, where it looks like this. But the bottom line for this, so you can kind of read through, basically a lot of nutrients like calcium, iron, zinc you can find in plant foods. The bottom line for all of this is if you are whole food plant-based or if you're over the age of 50, we do recommend supplementing with B12. And then you may or may also need vitamin D. We do recommend getting in foods for omega-3s as well. But if you have any questions about this, we do recommend contacting your doctor or your dietitian.
So Kim, you can actually get all the nutrients you need from a plant-based diet then?
Correct, yeah, except for the B12.
Mm-hmm.
Other things to consider, so cost. A lot of people tell me, it's so expensive, I can't eat healthy because it's so expensive. But it kind of depends on how you do it, and of course depends on your finances too. But if you're substituting, instead of meat, you're substituting things like beans, tofu, that can be a lot cheaper. This meal at the bottom here just shows you the comparison of cost for a hamburger patty to a bean patty. And a bean patty is a third of the price. And so that way, you can save to have more money available for some vegetables. As far as the fruits and vegetables go, fresh or frozen is equally as good. Buying in bulk for the grains or the beans, that can also help save more money. And then also thinking about the costs that are hidden, costs to your health. So things like medications, doctor visits, time spent, also the way you feel, what costs would you put on that? There's a lot of hidden costs as well. So ideally, we encourage you to cook most of the time, make your own food, because in the processed foods, like Viv mentioned, there can be a lot of harmful things, even if you are eating vegan. More and more research too is coming out with that some of the processed foods have things that can be harmful to your gut bacteria, all of that. But if you're traveling or if you're looking for a place where you can find a vegetarian or vegan meal, you can go to the website happycow.net and type in your zip code or city. If this is fairly new to you, I do recommend, maybe trying a few restaurant meals just to see how they're making foods, vegetarian or vegan, what's making it taste good, how they do it, and then maybe going home and trying to replicate that recipe just to kind of broaden your horizons, because I know for some, if it's really new to them, it can be a pretty steep learning curve in the beginning.
So are there some good places on Oahu, Kim?
Yeah, so I know Peace Cafe, they have a lot of options. They also do, upon request, a no oil plate. Recently I heard about the Ethiopian restaurant here. They went vegetarian and they're working on going all vegan, which I think at this time is very respectable, trying to do that, because they probably do realize that they will be losing some money though for that. Also, I like to go to the Beat Box. It's a little bit farther for me. What about on the Big Island, Viv?
Yeah, we do have quite a few places. The most of the health food stores, Island Naturals, which is in Kona and Hilo, do have hot and cold food options that you could, take out. And then also in Waimea, we have a health food store here that also has a counter. There's lots of restaurants that have bowl options, so you can actually mix and match and go 100% plant-based. So I think there are more and more options happening all the time.
Yeah, or you can even just order from the sides menu if you're at a restaurant where they're not vegan or vegetarian offerings. So some tips on transitioning. It depends on where you're at, depends on what you're willing to do. There's different levels. For some people, transitioning 100% from in 24 hours, that might not be a practical thing. For a lot of people, it could take months. Could take a little bit of time, and so different levels. Good could be using animal-based food more as a condiment, or depending where you're at, cutting out half of the animal food and replacing it with something like lentils or tofu or tempeh, or aiming for half a plate of non-starchy vegetables at each meal, thinking of adding in the healthy plant foods. Better could be using transitional plant-based foods, because of course, the vegan sausage, it's processed, but it's still probably a lot better for you than the regular sausage. So using some of those. As far as the burgers go, I know there's more and more options, but I do recommend to stick to the idea of at least choosing less processed things. Try to stick to maybe the bean-based burgers, because at least you can kind of see what it looks like. You know, it's still, you can tell that there's still some plant foods in there compared to things that look a lot more like meat. Or best, you know, if you're ready to go all the way, you know, trying to stick to the whole foods plant-based. So these are just some examples. You know, it could be just picking one meal a day to start with. Then in a couple weeks adding in another meal. It could be picking a certain amount of days per week to go plant-based, or adding in beans and lentils. You know, this many days a week I'm going to try to have at least half a cup of beans per day or something like that. Other things, you know, definitely planning. If it's new to you, planning is very, very important in terms of just taking a few minutes out of your day to plan what the next day is going to look like, so that you can make sure you have the things in your kitchen needed to make your meals. Thinking about the vegetable first, and thinking about maybe the protein more as a side dish. If you are able to have potlucks or gatherings, then you can just host one ingredient gatherings where somebody brings one thing. So like a taco bar where one person brings beans, somebody else brings lettuce, somebody else brings tomatoes, so that nobody actually has to make anything. And then taking time to stock your kitchen, you know, figuring out what you need, figuring out what you might need to throw away or get rid of, because of course if it's in your kitchen, you're probably eventually going to eat it at some point. So if you know it's not the best for you, maybe considering getting rid of it. Batch cooking, if you're making a meal so that you'll have leftovers for later, that can save a lot of time. And then if you get off track, you know, be kind to yourself. Take a deep breath. Treat it as a learning experience. Try to figure out what happened and how you can avoid it in the future. And also another thing that can be very helpful, taking a minute to write down your why it's important to you to make this change, why you think this will benefit you, and putting it somewhere, you know, maybe taping on your mirror or something, just so you can remind yourself, you know, of why this is important to you when things get more difficult. And so the basic idea that, you know, don't beat yourself up if you do have something that you shouldn't have had. At least try to enjoy it while you're having it, but then just after that, focus on getting back on track. Definitely having support people is very useful. So research has shown that people who have a support person or support people tend to be a lot more successful. Connecting with people on social media, attending plant-based events or conferences. I know on Hawaii, we have our Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, and they have webinars online, and before COVID, they're doing a lot of free talks, bringing in speakers. Their website is vsh.org. And have fun with it. You know, maybe have fun trying out new foods, trying out new recipes, cooking with friends and family. And then on the last page of the plant-based diet booklet, page 16 and 17, we just have some websites, some resources for you. So on your own, you can just take some time and read through that. There's one book that's not on the list that I really recommend. It's called How Not to Die by Dr. Greger. As far as the recipes go, like Forks Over Knives, Dr. McDougall, PCRM. Nutrition Facts is a good place to go for health-related information, where he has short videos. Down to Earth too, if you go to their website, they have cooking videos and recipes online as well. And so we gave you the meal planning sheets. You know, you can maybe take a minute after this class to fill out a plan for tomorrow of what you're going to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We also have more recipes on our kp.org food blog. So if you just search kp.org for our Food for Health blog, you know, we have a tofu scramble recipe up there. We have curry quinoa. I think Viv might have some oatmeal bite recipes up there too for snacks. And then Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen is another really good app. So this is how you can kind of track to see how well you're doing in terms of including all the whole food plant-based foods. It's grouped into different food groups. If you click on the food groups, it tells you what a serving size is equivalent to, and throughout the day you can kind of check off as you're eating a serving of each of those foods. So up here we just have some recipes or some ideas again for goals, thinking about what your goal might be, maybe writing it down. And then other resources for Kaiser members. So we offer one-on-one appointments with a dietitian or lifestyle coach. If you're interested in more information or to register, you can give us a call. Our number is up here, 432-2260. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today and listening. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we wish you well.